All right, so to kick it off, no pun intended, let's have everybody grab their tambourine if you have one. I'm sure that spiked the mic a little bit. That was pretty loud even over here to my ears. So we're going to be working on my book, and I know some of you have it. If you don't, it's okay, but here it is. Some of you have it in digital format. I will screen share some of the exercises that we'll be working on from time to time, which is why you don't need to have it, because you can just reference the screen share. But let's go ahead and get our bodies set up. So I know a lot of you are kind of at a workstation, maybe a computer workstation, and are therefore sitting down. And I have my stool here just for resting. But if you can, let's stand up and let's establish our playing position as best we can. Hopefully you have enough room around you to do this. We're going to do this just to sort of fast forward things. I normally do it without instrument in hand, but we'll do it with instrument in hand for right now, just so that we don't take too much time on this. If you have read or worked through my book, one of the things that you'll notice is a fairly lengthy narrative up front about establishing the body, and I kind of use this phrase throughout as establishing our body as an instrument. And the point of that, I think, the way I see this, is that if our body is in the best possible position, if we are ultimately producing sound physically from the striking, shaking, or whatever with the percussion playing that we do, it has to start here first. It has to start with our own personal physical setup. And this gets us very quickly to this approach that is very similar to what we do when we sit down at a workstation, a computer workstation, and that is thinking about things ergonomically, or thinking about ergonomics. And the idea of ergonomics is adapting your workstation to you when you are in the best possible physical position, rather than the other way around. And so a great example of this, and we've all probably been in these scenarios, is if you have been to school, if you've been to, say, junior high or high school, or maybe even at the university you attend, and you have a non-height adjustable mallet instrument, marimba, xylophone, whatever, and it is either 1 foot too high or 2 feet too short, whatever the case may be, and you adapt your body to it. So if it's too short and you have to squat in order to get down to that position, or if it's too high and you're up on your tiptoes, or if you're doing something else that's manipulating your body to that non-height adjustable instrument, you are breaking the rules and breaking the laws of ergonomics. That instrument needs to be adjusted to you and not the other way around. Same thing we're dealing with here. So we're going to start with posture, we're going to start with stance, we're going to start with vertical alignment, which is sort of the key component to good posture. It's not enough to just say, hey, stand up straight. That needs to be unpacked a little bit more. We need to know exactly what that means. So this idea of vertical alignment is thinking about the head being positioned above the hips, being positioned above the heels or above your ankles. And if we have those things in alignment, vertical alignment pretty much takes care of itself. Beyond that, there's a couple of other key components that I would like you to think about in order to maintain a relatively tension-free physical positioning as we go about our playing. And that is thinking about the shoulders dropping down and being pushed slightly back. Shoulders down and back. You can think about the shoulder blades behind your back sort of coming together. Now, you will feel a little bit of a pull in the chest when you do this. That's okay. We're working against what we all tend to naturally do, which is hunch over and fall over. Okay? So shoulders down and back, vertical alignment, head above hips, above heels. The arms hanging loosely at the body, and your feet more or less shoulder width apart. Once we're in this position, I want you to do just a couple of deep breathing sessions of inhaling through the nose letting the belly expand as you do so, and exhaling slowly through the mouth. If you want to feel that belly expand and contract, you can put your opposite hand, the hand not holding the tambourine, you can put that on the belly. Inhale through the nose, let the belly expand, and exhale through the mouth. Repeat this a couple of times. Inhale and exhale. During each one of these repetitions, we are focusing and concentrating on our physical body. We're focusing on staying tension-free. We're examining the position of the shoulders. We're examining our entire body from head to toe and trying to get us to the best possible state. One add-on to this breathing technique, and this is something that you can just sort of put into your own personal approach before really you play any instrument. Put this to a metronome, put this to a clicker, so that you keep yourself within a very stable cycle. And we can think about an inhale taking 4 counts, and an exhale taking 6 counts. So that exhale is always going to take a little bit longer than the inhale. We're going to inhale through the nose, as I've already mentioned. And when you exhale through the mouth, I want you to try this. I want you to put the tip of your tongue just behind your front upper teeth. Okay? Your cheeks, your mouth, your lips are going to be held loosely. You're going to have a slight opening in your lips, but that tongue is going to be positioned just behind your front upper teeth. When you exhale, I want you to experience that tongue as a point of resistance, that you are blowing air out and around. Okay, so that tongue is sort of a bit of a stopper that's going to make that exhale a little bit longer than the inhale. Can we try that? So this is going to be our metronome. We're going to inhale for 4 and exhale for 6, and we'll go through a couple of cycles so that you can catch on. 2, ready, and inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale with resistance, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. One more cycle, this time inhale for 4 counts, exhale for 8 counts. So really, really now train that exhale. Take your time with it so that it takes up that entire span of 8 counts. Still focusing on our body, still focusing on staying very, very relaxed. Here we go. 3, 4. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. One more time. Inhale, 2, expand the belly. Exhale with resistance. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good. So that only takes a couple of minutes up front, but it gets our body into this really, really nice, natural, tension-free, as much as possible, tension-free physical positioning. And it's from here that we want to do all of our playing. One of the things that I notice most, especially with people who are just coming to tambourine playing, early on in their tambourine journey, is how much we embed tension in the process, particularly when we get to shake rolls. It's a very tension-inducing act in order to try to play a shake roll. And so if we come at it from this position of everything is fully relaxed, everything is tension-free, as much as possible, and we're monitoring that along the way, we have a better chance when we get to those high tension, high stress playing situations, we have a much better chance to stay as tension-free as possible. Okay? So we're in that position now, and we're going to get our tambourine to its playing position. I mentioned in the book as well, it doesn't matter which hand you hold the tambourine in. Some people hold right, some people hold left. I am a right-handed holder myself, which means my right hand does all of my shake rolling and my left hand does all of my rhythmic playing. The one thing I would offer to you as a suggestion is try to really lock one of those things in. Meaning don't change mid-playing unless you absolutely have to. And there should be very few cases when you absolutely have to. One way or another, your weak hand is going to have to develop a skill that it doesn't naturally possess. Either it's going to have to learn how to do fast rhythmic playing, or it's going to learn how to do shake rolling. So it has some work to do, you just need to choose. So for me, my strong arm holds, and my weak arm strikes. Most people do it opposite, but either way is fine. We're going to grasp the tambourine in the same way you might pick up, say, a piece of luggage or something. Use that nice opposable thumb you have. That is rested on the rim or maybe sliding just a little bit onto the head side of the tambourine. Other fingers wrap around on the underside. I know this is very, very basic, but I love starting from the beginning. Whether you're advanced, intermediate, or just starting out with tambourine, always good to go back through this stuff. So we have a grip of sorts. We can't think of it as a true, say, snare drum grip or something comparable like that because the frame of the drum feels so different. But we do have opposing pressure on either side of the tambourine between the thumb and usually the first and middle finger on the other side of the drum. From here, we are going to pivot up with the elbow and bring the tambourine up somewhere in front of you. Little side note, please remember there are a lot of different ways to do all of this stuff. And perhaps some of you have been taught a slightly different way for the sake of the masterclass that obviously I am delivering. We're going to do it my way. And if you haven't done that before, just try it, see how you like it. So we have pivoted up just from the elbow, and we're positioning the tambourine in front of our body. I like to think about having a strike zone that is basically sort of upper belly to mid-chest. And this is where I do the vast majority of my tambourine playing. So the tambourine is up in front of my body in that strike zone, and it's being held at a 45-degree angle. The 45-degree angle guarantees that when we strike it, afterwards the jingles are going to quickly come to rest. So for most of our rhythmic playing, we want that nice, clear, clean chick. We want to engage the jingles. We want them to activate. We want them to make their sound. And then we want them to go away very quickly to make room for whatever the next rhythmic playing we're going to do. So nice, clean, and clear. And that 45-degree angle is going to help guarantee that. Some of you can look under my head here, some of you might choose to put a finger or two of muffle on the underside of the head. That's fine if you want to do that. You also, you don't have to do that, okay? So you can have your head ringing nice and free, or you can have just a little bit of finger muffling underneath. Some of you might also have some other muffling going on as well on the tambourine head. Basic positioning, 45-degree angle. We've pivoted up from the elbow in the holding hand. With the striking hand, we do exactly the same thing. We pivot up, we're hinging just from the elbow, and we're bringing our hand, our beater in this case, over the tambourine. Okay? The beauty of this, in my mind, is that we haven't changed anything that we've established previously, other than hinging up from the elbow, which, guess what, is the same thing that we do when we play snare drum, or mallets, or a lot of other things. So we've pivoted up from the elbows in the exact same way, and we've brought our instrument into this strike zone. So if you have a tambourine or a pan, let's get to that position. Establish yourself here. Make sure that in the act of doing this, we haven't added any tension into the shoulder and neck area. That tends to be where it creeps in. Okay? And from here now, we're going to shape our beater. So your non-holding hand serves as your beater. There are a lot of different shapes and manipulations we can do with that, but for standard playing, I like this bird beak method. So this bird beak approach is simply bringing your fingers together with your thumb and creating a playing surface at the tips. I like this approach because it has some flexibility. If we have all fingers and thumb together, we have a fairly wide surface here with which to play, which works pretty well for forte playing, even down to mezzo forte playing. But if we want to shrink this implement, we can simply by taking fingers away. We release the pinky, maybe you release the ring finger. By doing it, we are shrinking the surface area that we have here at the tip. We can leave just the middle finger, we can play just with the first finger. So all of that we can do, of course, in a moment's notice as we change dynamics and try to coax different sounds out of the instrument. Okay, so that's that bird beak approach. Sure, there's also a fist, there's a hand, there's other things that we can do. You can use knuckle, but for most standard playing, we're going to use that bird beak approach. So get to that position, and I want you to, for right now, place that bird beak on the head somewhere between the center of the tambourine and the edge. Okay, so we're not all the way on the rim, we're not dead center, we're somewhere in between, and I'm doing this at a distance and a placement that is opposite where my body is. Okay? So opposite where my body is. Some will choose to play down here, some will choose to play up here, some will play in between. What we're about to do in the first exercise is we're going to explore sound. Okay? So let me screen share our first exercise. This is going to be exercise 1-1 if you have the book. We'll get this queued up. So scrolling through my PDF copy of this, you can see the nice illustration here that we just walked ourselves through. That's me, by the way. Cartoon me. Hope you like that. I didn't draw it. Not that talented. Illustration 1-1, just sort of checking in here. This is the positioning that we have found ourselves in now. 45-degree angle on that tambourine. Bird beak position in the striking hand. Close-up of the striking hand. Now we're going to deal with beating spots on the head and exploring sound. Okay, so exercise 1-1, you can all see is painfully easy. Painfully easy. We've got 2 bars of quarter notes followed by 2 bars of eighth notes. And we do this at moderate tempo. It's easy because we are trying to explore sound and not worry about the difficulty of the passage. We're trying to listen to the tambourine. Think about our sound, think about our stroke. Okay? So, we are going to go through this now. I'll throw the metronome on a nice moderate tempo. We don't have to do this simultaneously, but I will demonstrate. You can try this on your own. Quarter note equals 70. I'll play it a slightly softer dynamic just to make sure I'm not peaking the mic. And as I go through this, I'm going to change positions here and there. I'm going to change my bird beak implement here and there. I'm going to listen to what the tambourine is giving me. I'm going to explore what those variables are, and I'm going to see how they affect my sound. Okay? So by doing this and listening to the tambourine, I'm examining what I hope to be a nice agreeable tambourine sound that I'm defining as my own. Now we can argue over what that is. The tambourine If you guys ever nerd out to classifications of instruments, the tambourine itself falls into two different classifications. It is membranophone because it has a head, it has a membrane stretched across it. And it's also an idiophone because of the jingles along the frame, along the shell. And so it actually is an instrument that has a composite sound. It has both a head sound and this metallic jingle sound. And we have to come to terms with and understand what we want that combination to be. Do we want more head? Do we want 60 head, 40 jingle? Do we want it the other way around? Do we want all jingle? And how do those things change and morph based on the playing that we are doing? And I think they should change and morph based on the playing that we're doing. It's why we take an easy exercise like 1-1 to explore this. How much head do you want in the mix? How much jingle do you want in the mix? How does that shift or change as we explore different dynamics? And how does the implement itself impact that? Okay? So it doesn't have to be this particular exercise. It can be a nice, free, open improvisation where you're playing big, broad, longer notes, things that aren't insanely fast. And we go through this process and we think about what sound we're trying to define. As I played through that, I went from something that was about mezzo forte down to something that was soft. The stroke changes a little bit for me. So in the beginning, I'm using largely an arm stroke that's hinging from the elbow. Especially when we're playing longer rhythmic values. As I got down softer, I incorporated a little bit more wrist. In order to play that nice delicate playing towards the edge. We're going to use that combination of arm and wrist stroke, again, based on the passage you're playing, the rhythmic complexity or density, and also the dynamic that you're playing. So we're going to explore a couple of different exercises up front that will get us into some of those choices. So exercise 1-2, again, if you're following along, meant to be played slightly faster overall. I'm going to share this. Also a rather basic exercise, series of eighth notes followed by a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a series of eighth notes followed by 1 en, 2 en, 3 en, 4 en. So basically we have sort of a check pattern up front that we enhance in the second measure. We go back to that check pattern and then enhance it slightly differently in the fourth measure. So we're going to try this. We're going to take it a little faster. Not insanely fast, but just a little bit faster. And as we get into the 16th note passages, I want you to think about activating a little bit more wrist. So a lot of times I will frame things as having sort of a macro stroke and a micro stroke. Here the macro stroke is the eighth note grid. Dun, 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 dun. And the micro stroke, a little wrist flick within that. Dun, da, da, dun, da, da, dun, da, da, dun, da, da, dun. So it's not night and day. It's not black and white where it's all arm for the eighths and it's all wrist for the 16th patterns. It's a mixture of the two. Okay, I'll demonstrate that. You can try this on your own as well. Okay, again, fully exploring all of the different manipulations you can do either with your bird beak formation or your beating spot as you change dynamics and change tempi. Basic passages that are meant to be sat on for long periods of time where you fully exercise all of these variables. I'll take just a little bit of a side note here to explain You know, a lot of times with these, especially with these accessory instruments, we practice them. We put them typically into a framework of orchestral percussion, which is fine. It's where we see them a lot of times. But a lot of the material that's been produced in terms of, you know, educational resources, and a lot of the ways we tend to teach these things, and a lot of the ways that many of us have learned them, is through the orchestral repertoire, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's a rich body of repertoire. It's where a lot of the great tambourine and triangle playing does happen, and so we absolutely should study it. I think sometimes, however, because these instruments are overall somewhat neglected in terms of the time we put towards them in practice, the little time that we do spend on them is then very narrowly focused just on those orchestral examples. So for a lot of people, one of the first excerpts that they work on is Carnival Overture, which is great. It's wonderful. It does all the things. It has us, depending on how you do the end, we have some hand to knee stuff. If you don't do hand to knee and do it all up on the drum, then you have some very fast single hand playing. We have shake rolls. We have to deal with how we play from soft dynamic to a loud dynamic within a roll. We have accented moments. We have to play the line. We have to somehow, you know, tie this into what the orchestra is doing. It does so many wonderful things. But it's still relatively narrow if all we're practicing is just that thing. What I'm trying to get at with my approach to all of this is, let's strip all that away and let's focus just on the instrument itself. Let's learn how to approach the instrument in the same way that we might approach basic snare drumming, starting a beginner on pad or drum, how we might approach a keyboard instrument for the first time. When we're teaching marimba, when we're teaching, maybe to make a better connection here, when we're teaching xylophone, do we take that beginner and say, the first thing you're going to do is Porgy and Bess? It's a great piece. We learn from the orchestral repertoire. Let's get into Porgy and Bess. This is where we need to put our energy. Well, of course not. There are so many steps along the way before we get to Porgy and Bess. We have to establish that foundation. So my hope with going through basic exercises like this is that you take the time to establish that. You don't immediately jump to Carnival Overture. You don't immediately jump to playing Delacluze etudes on the tambourine. All of those things are wonderful, but save them for a little bit down the line. Spend time with the instrument, learning the instrument itself first. Okay, a couple of other one-handed rhythmic playing exercises we'll go through, and then we'll take a pause for some questions. So the next one will be two-note groups. So I have this little syncopated exercise here. 4 bars, 2 notes that of course are just, as you can see, displaced in various parts of a 16th note grid. 1E, 2E, 3, 4E, and a, E-N, 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 dun, ba-dun, 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 ba-dun. We're going to take this, and as I've done before, I'll demonstrate it at a couple of different dynamic levels. Bump the tempo from where we were before. I really want to make sure that I'm engaging my wrist in this. Nice quick wrist stroke. I'm still delivering that macro stroke a little bit from the forearm, and then a nice flick of the wrist when I get down to the head. Da-da, 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 bum, ba-dum, 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 ba-dum. And repeat. 2, ready, Okay, within that, even within my soft playing, I'm exploring different spots on the tambourine. You'll see that in soft playing a lot. A lot of people will come down a little bit closer to the hand. All of that continues to be exploratory. And what are we evaluating? We're evaluating what we're getting out of the drum. We're evaluating how much jingle we have in the mix. We're evaluating the sensitivity of those things. All of these, of course, are meant to be played, again, at all different dynamic levels within a pretty broad tempo range. We haven't gotten to this place yet, but we can play that exact same exercise with a little bit of heel of the hand muffling. Right? In all different degrees of that. So basic material, fully explored. It's kind of like the first 3 pages of stick control. Not that I'm in any way comparing my book to stick control, but it's taking the source material and saying how much can we vary this, how much can we think deeply about this, how far can we take this to really understand these basic approaches. Okay, let's do the same thing now with 3-note groupings. Quick screen share. This will be exercise 1-4. And after this, we'll get some questions. So if you have them, think about them, start to type them in. Three-note groupings. You can read the rhythm. Now I put this into the parameters of a 3/4 time signature for no other reason than to just create a little bit of variation between exercises. The point is that we are repping these 3-note groupings and we're thinking about the positioning of these 3-note groupings within different manifestations here on the page. You, of course, can create your own as well. You can turn this into a triplet exercise. Ta-ta-tan, 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 ta-ta-tan. The point is that we are tying together 3 notes. Still think of that slightly larger macro motion coming from the forearm, and then flick of the wrist, getting those fast notes. I'll bump this down in tempo just a little bit. We have more notes to account for here. We're at quarter equals 99. I'll stand back up. Sorry, I'm being lazy and I'm not being a good illustrator of the stance that we worked so hard to set up at the beginning of this. Yatatan, datatan, 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 tam, papa pim, papa pum, papa pum, papa pum, papa pum, papa 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 papa, and a little 2-note turnaround there at the end. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Okay? Those syncopations, especially the offbeat iandas at the end, those are nice timing exercises too. But it's the same. It's the same motion over and over, obviously displaced as you can see. It's not trying to insult anyone's intelligence about what's going on in the exercise, but I'm just saying it's pretty obvious. What we can do with that, though, in addition to all of those other exploratory things that I've mentioned before, is that we can start to think about shape. We can start to think about strong beats and weak beats. We can start to think about how we would play these passages like this in a more quote-unquote musical manner. If we see something like this within concert literature, whether orchestra or band, or whether it's an etude itself, it's not just a computer reading of ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. I think if you were to hear or sense that same rhythmic figure, say on timpani, you would naturally embed yapapan, tinta tam, tita tam, tita tam, tita tam, tita ta, yam, papa, tin, tata, tin, tata, tin, tata, tin, tata, tin, tata, papa, 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 ya, papa, papa. So maybe a little bit more weight on the strong beats, shaping away from those over the figure that is 1 en, 2 en, 3 en. Yearning for a strong beat in the displaced 3-note figure, e-na, di-da-da, 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 da-da, ya-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. All of this we bring to the table, right? So even though I'm latching on to the method book that I've spent a lot of time thinking about and writing, the point of it is always just giving source material, just giving fodder for the musician, the you, to explore, to mess around with move around, change things up, create your own exercises. This is just the beginning. This is just a way to open the conversation into this approach. Okay, so let's see if any questions have come up so far. Basically, we have focused exclusively on one-handed rhythmic playing. We're going to slide into some variations of rhythmic playing, and then we'll finish up with some rolling. Let's see. Yeah, just going back to, thank you for commenting that I actually dropped the tambourine. I actually kicked the tambourine. I didn't drop the tambourine, I kicked it with my heel. So even worse. Todd, could you vary your body angle as you demonstrate? Yes, and I hope I did do that, and I will continue to do that. I probably wasn't doing that initially, but good comment. Hui, how you doing? Great point about adding the implied phrasing to 16th figures, even if they're not notated. Yeah, so I think, you know, for all of us who do this stuff, sometimes it's hard as drummers. I'll go back to reflect on what I taught last week in snare drum. We take something like stick control and, you know, it's just dots on a page. And we get into sort of this, we spend so much time obsessing about technique. We get into this, unfortunately, sometimes robotic way of playing these because we're trying to make things so exact. But it's all music. It's all meant to be music. So shape it, phrase it, try different things. Okay, from Michaela. Hey Michaela, good to hear from you. How do you incorporate accessory study into percussion studio instruction? Are they topics that you cover frequently in master classes, studio class, or are they topics that you address individually with each student, a combination of both? That's a great question. Michaela, let's talk about that one at the end. And if I don't mention it at the end, remind me again, because I have thoughts about that. Do you ever decide to tilt the tambourine 45 degrees sideways as opposed to towards you? Also a good question. So I have it more positioned towards me, simply to keep everything, again, going back to that idea of ergonomics, to keep everything as close to me as possible. So if I tilted it, if it's 45 degrees is 45 degrees, right? I could do that out here. I could do it down here. When we get to hand to knee playing, I'm still going to be doing it, right? But it's going to be at a slightly different position. I do it here so that my striking hand can simply pivot up or hinge up from the elbow, right? I don't want to have to reach out here. I don't want to have to put it up here. We'll see this a lot, yeah? Sometimes in orchestral playing, sometimes the conductor wants that, and that's fine. And if they do, they ask for it, they want to see the sound, sure, we do that. But my basic core playing, I'm not going to go into a 1-hour practice session and play. Not unless I know that that conductor is going to ask me to play that way in the concert. Because, I mean, my shoulders are going to be throbbing afterward. That's just terrible for the body. That doesn't make any sense. Next week's class will be on triangle. We do this even more so with triangle. Yeah? There's nothing inherently wrong with that, other than it's added stress on our shoulders. So, sure, you can have that 45-degree angle in any position you want. I want it as close to me as possible. Okay, ideas for integrating accessory playing into a warm-up practice regime for those working not in university. There's going to be some of these that I'll categorize as more general questions. Let's lump those towards the end. So I want to make sure that if there's anything specific to what we've just covered, that we cover that first. Do you label different points of your tambourine where you may start or end when performing rhythmic figures in finger thumb rolls? Absolutely, and that's such a good point, Richard. So I'll mention that when we do start talking about these friction rolls, finger or thumb, I usually measure it by the pegs that are driven through in order to hold the jingles. But I mean, you can put whatever you want on the head, right? So if you want to, I mean, unless you think you're going to damage your head. This is a synthetic head tambourine, but if you want a little Sharpie to have different points along the way, totally fine. I mean, embed what you need to embed. I think that's a great idea. Ethan, hopefully I'm not getting ahead, but how do you go about performing grace notes specifically at louder dynamics? Okay. A little bit ahead, but I'll try to remember addressing that. And then Ian, good to hear from you. For people looking to buy an all-around tambo and can't afford multiple options, what do you recommend? Oh, also a good question. So let me answer that one. Let me try to remember the grace note question, and then we're going to move on. So there are a lot more instrument options nowadays than there were 25 years ago when I was getting my first tambourine. In my opinion, the standard sort of orchestral tambourine sound that a lot of us grew up with, if you listen to older recordings, is going to be just sort of that classic German silver jingle. But there's just so many options now. I still think the German silver is a really nice way to go. It's bright, it has good clarity, which I think more than anything is one of the things we need out of our tambourine. It is not the most articulate jingle of all of the jingle options that are out there now, but it's plenty articulate, in my opinion, and it still has a nice full roll to it when we do shake rolls. So I would still default to that, but there's so many like hybrid things now and mixed metal. So I'm playing, what am I playing? The Black Swamp TC1S, the synthetic head. So that's the chromium 25 and phosphor bronze, and I really like it. This for me is kind of, I mean, I have a German silver, but this is one of my general tambourines. I think it has nice clarity, but I think it shakes really well too. When I was younger, my first tambourine I bought actually was an old Black Swamp beryllium copper, and it had just luscious shake rolls. It made me feel so good about my shake rolls. Like I love, I could just do it all day long, and it felt really good, and it was just super wet, and I don't know, there was something about it that just wonderful for rolls, but it wasn't articulate enough. So and it probably hindered my shake roll development because it sounded so good naturally. So something in the middle, Ian, I think is a good place to go. All right, so let's get into some slightly more advanced rhythmic playing things. If you're tracking through the book, we're actually going to jump ahead before we jump back. So I want to finish with rolls, but let's do a little bit of hand to knee manipulation and then a little bit of two-handed playing. And then we'll jump back into rolls. So faster rhythmic playing has to be manipulated in slightly different ways. We will all have a speed threshold at which we can't go beyond for our one-handed rhythmic playing. I would encourage everyone to try to push that threshold, that limit, as far as you can. So if you are a weak-handed rhythmic player, like I am, meaning I play with my left hand, my weak hand, I always need to work on how far I can push, things like that, because I want to do as much of my rhythmic playing as possible just with one hand. But if it goes beyond that, and we have to do things that one hand can't do, then we capture that in slightly different ways. So hand to knee is probably the most standard thing that we tend to default to, maybe sometimes a little bit earlier than we need to. But hand to knee playing captures some of that fast rhythmic playing in a nice way. So let's push forward in the book. We're going to go to exercise 114. If you have it, you can turn to that. If not, Let me share real quick. Okay, so exercise 114 you can see down here at the bottom of the page. Similar to one of the exercises we were doing before, where basically we just set up this eighth note grid of sorts, and then we amplify that by throwing in some 16th note moments. And again, I teach, and I do this with my students as well. I try to teach as much as I can, always from sort of that foundational core principles place. So in doing some of this, I know some of you who are probably more advanced players, who perhaps have been doing this for a while, are thinking, oh, really? He's going to teach me how to play hand to knee? Okay, I learned that, like 10 years ago. I would encourage you to always go back to it. This is something that, in writing the book I did, and just really, these are like sort of the building blocks of what we do as percussionists. Stuff like this. This is what, if you think about your role in the orchestra, you think about your role in the concert band, it's material like this that we are often asked to play. Very rarely are you asked to play Delecluze 1 on the tambourine. It's wonderful when you do. I love it. It's exciting. But you are more likely to play a tambourine part that perhaps looks something like exercise 114 or 115 or 116. And we have to be really, really good at that stuff. And we really need to know how to manipulate it in order to make it speak. Okay? So I left that up on the screen, hopefully for long enough that you've sort of semi-memorized it. And I'm going to shift back into regular view. The idea here, of course, is that the static rhythm, the eighth notes in this case, are always being driven from the hand, and that the filler notes are coming from the knee, and not the other way around. If it's the other way around, if the first note is instigated from the knee, we get a little bit of that extra hiccup sound right before that dirties or muddies the waters. Knee positioning, just real quick. So I don't know if you can see this in my screen, but I am using the base of a snare drum stand. This is a great little trick too for those of you who are either on the orchestral audition circuit or hope to be one day. You're already packing this in your bag. Maybe you pack an extra one so that you don't have to change anything out in the audition itself. But a nice little snare drum bass is all you need. My foot is probably about 11, maybe 12 inches off the ground. I find that sometimes we do this with a chair, it gets the knee way too high. And if we're thinking about, again, that idea of ergonomics, it's putting our body position in not the best place. I raise the leg, the knee, that is on the side of my body that my holding hand is. So for me, I hold with the right hand. I use my right leg, my right knee. So we've elevated that foot, we've brought the knee a little bit closer to us, but I'm still trying to use that strike zone approach, and I'm still trying to manipulate things from that same basic approach to rhythmic playing, which is holding the tambourine still at that 45-degree angle. Okay? That's going to guarantee a consistent sound from what I was doing before with one-handed rhythmic playing. And it's also going to guarantee that nice, clean chick sound that we're after. So, we set up and we establish the eighth note static pattern. This will be coming from the hand. For me, I maintain my bird beak hand position. I don't change this. I move my beater position, my hand position, out towards the rim, and I play over the rim when I do this. On the underside of the tambourine, it is the rim, it is the frame that is striking the knee. Now, there are other ways to do this, obviously, and I'm sure you have explored them. We can slide off the knee and have the knee itself strike the underside of the membrane. And then our hand is, of course, directly opposite of that. We can change the bird beak approach to something that is a fist, maybe something that emulates the knee shape a little bit more to try to get that consistency of sound. Some people will turn the tambourine over and play this way. Yeah? So here's why I do what I do. I don't do any of those other things. I do this. I'm trying to minimize my variables in playing situations. If I could play my hand to knee stuff all day long from this position, I would, because I have a nice big open space here, right? And it's really easy for me to match my beating spot between my hand and my knee. But what I don't like about that is getting to it. We sometimes have to incorporate that hit to get into that position, which has this extra sound that's just slightly different. And if we're doing that, especially in an excerpt environment or solo playing environment, there is a danger that we will hear that. If you happen to be playing a passage where you have no other playing to do, and you can just start from this position, or you have a duplicate tambourine out, okay, that's great. But for me, I'm trying to minimize those variables, so I'm going to play everything from here. Right above the rim with my hand, right on the rim against the knee on the underside. You do you. You do what makes sense to you. The approach, the basic approach is still the same. So we set up our eighth note static pattern. Ta, 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 ta. And then we feed in the 16th note partials here and there. When we do this initially, I want you to think about the feeding in of the 16th note partials. The feeding in of those partials, I want those to be a little bit louder. I want you to overemphasize them. Ta, ta, tato, tu, tato, tu, tato, tu, tato, tu, tato, tu, tato, tu, tato. Okay? So we're going to have a little imbalance to counteract what typically happens, which is an imbalance the other way. Let's see. We'll throw the Met on. That's too fast. I like working at awkwardly slow tempi, especially when doing faster passages, because it really lets us examine how we're doing with them. Ta 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 jagadagada pa 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 sagadagadagadagada. All right? You can play this with me. You can just sit and watch. We'll go a couple of times through this repetition. Think mezzo forte forte somewhere around there. 1, 2, ready, and. Okay, so we played with that imbalance of amplifying, accenting perhaps, putting a little bit more stroke and energy into the added 16th notes. The reason I do this up front is because it is a weaker stroke, right? So playing the stroke like this, bringing the forearm down, is antithetical to most any and everything we do in the other percussion areas of our life. Do you ever practice the snare drum playing a downward forearm stroke like this? How often are we in playing situations where we are activating that particular mechanism? Very rarely. This is one of the few. So I want to lean into that a little bit more, and I want to think about it a little bit more, and I want to make sure that that inherently weak stroke doesn't come across as sounding inherently weak in the context of a passage like this. If you join me next week for the the triangle class, we will do the same thing when we are rolling with that upstroke that goes up against the side rail rather than the downstroke that comes when we're rolling back and forth. It's inherently weak, both of those things. The beauty is that we get to work on that stroke in both situations, right? Tambourine playing and triangle playing. So once you spend a little bit of time overemphasizing that note that we insert, then you can slowly let that morph into something that is, of course, more even overall. The tempo that I did this, or illustrated this, is not a tempo that necessitates hand-to-knee playing. right? So I could play, and I would, if I had that passage at that tempo, I would play it just with my hand. But as we do with many things, slow this thing down to really examine how you control things in the slow and mid-range tempi, rather than just saying, oh, I get it, hand to knee. Yeah, I think I understand. Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Isolate, spend some time thinking about the space between notes, spend some time thinking about volume between notes, and trying to get that nice even sound across. Several different manipulations of this in the book. All of them get to sort of the same thing. One of the best ways that I have found in analyzing, going back and evaluating our effectiveness in doing this is self-recording, which is something that of course we should use in all of our playing and practicing. It's hard to tell when you're on top of the tambourine exactly what things sound like. If you can get a microphone that is at least 15, if not 20, 30 feet away, if you can somehow simulate what your tambourine would sound like in a concert setting, because of course that's often how we are using this instrument, that will show you the levels of emphases and things that we need to shape, and how things are speaking. That will demonstrate to you what it sounds like to the audience's ear. So we can think sort of theoretically about that approach as we're standing with the instrument and we're manipulating it on our person, but ultimately it's how the sound translates out to the listener. So self-recording and gaining some distance between the microphone and you is a really, really effective way to do that. Okay, other fast rhythmic playing. I'll demonstrate just two other things and then we'll get into the roll category. Two-handed rhythmic playing. So sometimes there perhaps is a passage that is nuanced in such a way that this hand-to-knee approach maybe doesn't capture everything that you want captured. The hand-to-knee approach does have a low dynamic threshold, low dynamic limit that we can't usually get under. So this is a relatively loud approach overall, mezzo to loud. And if we need to play things a little bit softer, sometimes we have to manipulate that with two hands. So again, if following along in the book, if we turn the page to exercise 117, let's demonstrate this real quick. 1-17, wrist stroke in two-handed playing. You can see the passage there. At faster tempi, something like this. Yeah, I mean, you could play that hand to knee. I think there are some shape things in there that I'd prefer to play two-handed. And I know that ultimately, playing two-handed, I'm going to be able to play this faster than my hand-to-knee approach. Now, that's something, of course, I can just work on. I can work to play my hand-to-knee approach faster. But if I saw this on a tambourine part that I was playing, and I thought that I could get the volume that I needed out of my two-handed approach, I would default to that. So in playing that two-handed approach, what we have to do is we have to figure out a way to balance the tambourine. A couple of different ways to do this. Some people will balance it with the forearm, so place it back deeper towards the body, hanging the playing end of it off the leg, and we do that so that it has a little bit of room to move. Balancing it between the forearm, that fleshy part of the forearm, and the thigh itself, and making sure that we do that at a point that allows your hand to come play, typically out towards the edge of the instrument. We bring the other hand over, to get as matched a beating spot as possible, and we should be off to the races. Okay? We hang this off the edge specifically in this exercise because it's a louder dynamic. So if not, I might keep the whole thing on the thigh. If I was playing nice and soft, that would offer a lot more stability. But I need more jingle interaction here. I need the tambourine actually to move a little bit more here. So hanging it off the thigh, I'll play just a couple of measures here to demonstrate. There is a lot of action on the tambourine, so one of the things you have to work on here is the control. As we strike down and come back up, the thing moves. So you have to figure out the exact amount of pressure that we need to apply to the end of it. In doing that, how much head sound are we taking away, because ultimately you are muffling as you're doing it. And how stable you need the thing to be in order to play a faster passage like this. If that feels challenging because you are both holding the tambourine with the same arm that you're doing some of the striking, then we can do a slightly different position, and that is, if like me, you have just a bit of a belly. Some of you probably, you're young enough that you don't have the 43-year-old man belly, but if you have a little bit of a belly, you can actually tuck this a little bit deeper in, and we can lay a bit of the fleshy part of your stomach on the tambourine, and you can actually free up both arms to play with the exact same approach, meaning your striking hand in the previous example isn't both holding and striking. Okay, this takes a little bit of manipulation in order to get the thing tucked in there, but once you do, you're free to go. Now for me, I feel much, much better about playing that. I feel like I have freedom. I can really shape this thing. I can probably, I could play this as fast as I can move my hands, and I'm not worried about both holding and playing at the same time. So think about those different positioning options. See what works best for you. Again, this all goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, which is explore, explore, explore. See if you can find an approach and a setup that allows you to do these things in such a way that brings forth the music. Ultimately, it's problem solving, that's all it is. Okay, so last thing we're going to talk about is sort of the broad category of rolling. Shake rolls and friction rolls. Before we do that, let's take 2 to 3 minutes of a brief pause, see if there's any lingering questions that we need to answer for right now. Okay, where was the last one? Okay, Ian's was the last one, so right after that, Bastian. What are some scenarios that you decide to incorporate more of the head into the sound of the instrument? For me, pops. So, you know, big accented moments. That's when I'll change my implement as well. This is where, if you just do the black swamp emblem. So a full pop on the head. If I did this right now, I'd blow out your speakers. But that's all head. I mean, you get some jingle too, but a nice slap right in the middle is a nice way to do a kind of a highly accented note. It's rare that I really try to heavily incorporate more head than jingle sound. So I'm at least 50-50, if not 60-40 or 70-30 in favor of the jingles. Good question though. Might be backtracking a little. This is Alan's question. But when practicing, do you focus on creating a consistent sound from the instrument, or mechanics and staying relaxed, or a mix of both? Well, hopefully a mix of both. I think what we're getting at here is what is driving that particular practice session. Is the thing driving it all about the sound that is being created, or are we placing ourselves sort of in a vacuum of technique and saying, I just want to think about body mechanics right now. I think either approach is fine as long as we dabble in both in various practice sessions, and that ultimately we bring the two things together. So yeah, hopefully we're thinking about both of those simultaneously. But I think, as with anything, sometimes we do need to hyper-focus on one to do it, to really, really dig into it. Okay, is the macro-micro movement similar to the idea of push-pull when playing exercise 1 through 4? Is it more of a Muller technique? I've never been a Muller technique guy, just because I've never studied it in a serious enough way to fully understand everything about it and all the benefits. So I really can't speak to that. I'm sure, as with all of us, there are things that we do that probably tap into some of those, because we're all doing largely similar motions in these approaches. But I don't know enough to comment on that. And just generally overall, I have no problem owning up to the things that I don't know. If you were to ask me, a question about traditional cross grip technique on marimba playing, I don't know. I'm a Stevens technique player, so when my students ask me that stuff, I say, go see someone else who understands that. It's beyond me. Okay, why do we use the forearm for holding hand stroke instead of wrist, like traditional grip? This is from Brian, why do we use forearm for the holding hand stroke instead of wrist, like traditional snare drum? Brian, maybe unpack that a little bit more. I'm not sure that I totally understand that. The belly flesh of experience. Okay, it's a belly comment. I get it. Never thought I'd use my belly to do that. Off the leg, belly fat. Okay. All right, belly people. I think it's I love it. I have been exercising a lot lately, because what else am I going to do? And I'm losing some of it, but there's a limit. I'm going to stop right before the 6-pack because my tambourine playing is so important to me. Okay, I'd like to change my head from synthetic to skin. Do you have any recommendations? I have the beryllium copper tambo from Black Swamp. Oh, meaning you want to incorporate a natural skin head as opposed to synthetic. Well, I should know this as a Black Swamp company man. Don't most of the tambourines that they offer have both the synthetic and natural options? I don't know. If you have the copper, though, I would go with something for your natural skin head. I would go with something contrasting. That could be the German silver. It could be one of the hybrid things, the combos. For soft and quick passages, do you use two-handed playing or finger strokes? Yeah, so I didn't demonstrate that, but yeah. I think the soft, fast playing is in a lot of ways easier because you can put a lot more hand on the head. So basically, any sort of tapping that you do on a desk, you can do. It's super stable. You still get good reaction if you're out on the edge. If you know how to tap on a table, you can do that. I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but yeah. Black Swamp puts directions on every tambourine. Do they? Like, here's how you play tambourine? I'm not sure if that's what you meant, Zach, but that would be cool if they did. Oh, with the hand. Yeah, okay. I get it. You guys are good. Belly, belly, belly. I've used the technique in a concert where wearing worked fine. Make your button jacket. Yeah, Yeah, depending on what clothes that you wear, the belly technique may or may not work. Cummerbund may get in the way. Okay. Brian. Prior, I would use a traditional grip stroke when playing on my knee. Why that awkward forearm motion instead of traditional grip stroke? Traditional grip snare drum. Oh, I see what you're saying. Great. I think that's a great idea. I use the belly, the forearm thing was illustration, but I think, Brian, that's a really, really good point. So I think for other people you can try that. Okay. Thanks, Richard, for the private message there. The belly has brought in so many points of conversation. Okay, does the thumb always stay engaged in the bird beak approach during belly or knee playing? We've coined a new term, which is great. Totally depends. The thumb. I use the thumb even when I'm shrinking my bird beak. I always use the thumb for support, and we'll do this too if we're talking about friction rolls. I hardly ever leave a finger out on an island by itself. Can't be trusted. So I always have a little thumb in the mix just for support. Okay, so let's finish up with some sustain playing. We don't have a ton of time, but I do want to show you one of the things that I really have tried to think a lot about is developing the shake roll. And we'll probably spend more time talking about that than friction rolls. But the shake roll itself, I think, is the most tension-inducing act that we do on the tambourine. And I think this is the thing that we need to work on the most. So again, if you have the book, if you're referencing the book, you can flip back a little bit earlier from where we just were. And I have this whole approach that I do in sort of building up the shake roll from a less tense position back into a normal playing position, and hopefully holding on to that nice relaxed feel. So if people want to do this with me, this is from exercise 1-9. I'm not going to pull this up just for sake of time, but exercise 1-9 is a rhythmic increase-decrease exercise, and I love these exercises for all of the percussion areas. Of basically building something from slow to fast to slow. Old school drumming, they would actually call this an open-closed-open method. That didn't refer necessarily to the roll type, it referred to going from slow to fast to slow. I like putting a rhythmic grid on this and building things incrementally. So exercise 1-9 starts at quarter notes, goes to quarter trips, then eighth notes and eighth note trips, sixteenths, 5s, 6s, 7s, 30 seconds, and then tears the thing back down, right? So we are basically increasing our rhythm more or less by 1, all the way up to 30-second notes and tearing it back down. How I apply this to my shake roll technique. I start in this position, and I stay in this position. So we're going to develop this shake roll and that shake roll motion at the side of the body and not in our roll position. If you get up to your roll position in the strike zone, or for some of you who do it maybe higher up at the head, immediately you've added tension to the mix. No. No tension. So we're going to do it at the side of the body, and we're going to get to a place where we can really control all of those speed variations within this exercise. So let me demonstrate. You can do this with me or not, you can just watch. So, quarter, 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 quarter. Trip. Okay? So when we do this, it's not just about, oh, okay, I've done the exercise, now I can get up to roll position and do the roll. It's about understanding at each different pacing what your body is doing. It's understanding that as we go from the 5s to the 6s, or to the 6s to the 7s, aha, that's where I start to feel initial tension. Up to that point, I'm cool. Playing eighth notes, yeah, nice big rotation, stroke, totally fine, no big deal. Okay, now I'm feeling a little forearm tension. Ooh, when I play the 7s, it's starting to burn. Ah, when I'm playing the 32nd notes, my shoulder is locking up. We're identifying those pacings, and then we go back and we work on those specifically. So I did this exercise doing one iteration of each bar, but of course you could sit on them for a long period of time. If your breaking point is going from a quintuplet to a sextuplet, then we go back and forth over and over there. until we train the muscles, until we train the motion. I use this exact same exercise in one-handed roll development in four-mallet playing. I use the exact same concept of this exercise in my soft buzz roll approach to snare drum. And it's understanding the pacings that I think is the important thing. This, I think, best compares to one-handed roll development in marimba playing, and that for a lot of us, whether it's that one-handed roll or our tambourine roll, you have one gear, and your one gear is this, right? So you can do that. You can tense up, you can shake your entire body, and you can produce something that sounds like a tambourine roll. But you don't have any other gears. You can't play a slower roll, you can't play a faster roll, and you can't do any of it without really, really locking down the shoulder and locking down the forearm as you do it. And I think that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing for one-handed marimba rolls as well, right? If we're playing two-handed marimba, one mallet in each hand, right? Oh, of course, we're in the lower part of the instrument, nice, soft passage. Oh, we can slow the roll down. Oh, let the bar breathe. Oh, higher register. Yes, we move faster. As soon as we get to one-handed rolls, well, I got one speed. Okay, the roll goes this fast. So we need to be able to manipulate. We need to be able to control that. You create different textures when you play with different roll speeds. Different roll speeds are going to be useful in how you apply this to different parts of the repertoire. So sit on that for a long period of time. Get really, really good at that before we bring it up and put it into true roll position. Okay? So we'll focus on this as the last thing. I do apologize. We won't get to friction rolls, thumb rolls, finger rolls. I will hang out afterwards for a little bit if anybody has questions about that. It's a lot of material to get through overall in 90 minutes. So I'd rather not skim anything. So let's end with this. After we've done this for a long time, and we've trained the motion, and we're feeling really, really good about it, we're going to pivot back up to our basic playing position. And from here, I build a framework within which to play my roll. And the framework is this. I start from my rhythmic plane, 45-degree angle. I strike the instrument to vertical. I shake, and I bring it back. I strike to vertical, I shake, and I bring it back. When I'm really, really training this, nothing moves except the tambourine. My striking hand stays in the same position. So I've not taken this over the head. I haven't changed my basic body position at all. I'm helping myself out because as soon as I take this thing up, more tension in the shoulder, which is the whole point of that previous exercise, was to get rid of that. So I'm putting everything in the strike zone. I'm thinking about ergonomics. I'm getting the instrument into its shake roll position, which for me by default is vertical only because the jingles are more free in that position, yeah? You can play a shake roll from an angled position. It's just a little grittier, right? It just has a little bit more rhythmic vibrancy to it. But basic shake roll approach, I'm putting it in the vertical position, I am shaking it, and I'm coming out of it, okay? That alone, if you get nothing else from these 90 minutes, if you can take away this structured approach to shake rolling of developing it down here, hinging up from the elbow, creating your parameters and your framework, taking ample time to sit on that, like weeks, right? Not like, oh, 5 minutes of one and then 5 minutes the other, and then I'm back to what I was doing before. But really sit on it for a long period of time. And then at the very end, bleed those things together. And again, if you do have the book, I take you through this exact process. Bringing all of those things together at the end. If you get nothing else out of this session, do get that. Because I really do think the crux of what a lot of us experience as big challenge with playing tambourine is right here. It's in the development of the shake roll. If we can gather this, if we can understand how to do this, and understand how to remain relatively relaxed and tension-free when doing this, I think all of the other things can stem from this. This, in essence, becomes sort of the source material that we use in order to inform everything else, because I think it's one of the most challenging things. So tying those things together, I'm nice and big and bold with my initial stroke and my release stroke. There will be times, of course, when we have to nuance that, but if I'm just working on the framework of this, I'm striking big into it and big out of it. And I'm putting everything right in front of me as I do this. Do it in front of a mirror, do it in front of a camera so you can really see those positionings. 45, vertical, 45, back and forth. All different roll lengths, as many different dynamics, as much of a dynamic spectrum as you can get. In and out, back and forth. Starts down here, build parameters, tie the thing together, but take a long period of time to go through that process. Be very, very methodical about how you go through that process. Guys, there are all sorts of other things, obviously, beyond this, like I said, and not getting to the friction rolls, what we refer to as thumb or finger rolls. Maybe there can be another class dedicated just to that. Maybe there can be a final class in this series where I do all of the things that, because of poor time planning and time management, I can do all of those things in one class. So I didn't get to enough of the roll material in my snare drum class. I'm now cutting this short in roll material. Triangle, I'm positive I'll make the same error. So maybe then at the end it'll be like, oh, here's all of this stuff, and we'll pile it all together. Think about core material. Think about basics. Think about the fundamentals of what you're doing, and obsess about them. I think if you sit there and you obsess about them, if you don't try to jump through too many hoops too early on, you can develop a really, really nice basic approach to tambourine playing that from that position you can then take off into all different directions. Okay, if you want to take that into orchestral playing, beautiful. If you want to play rudimental snare drum solos on the tambourine, beautiful. If you want to play delicate on the tambourine, beautiful. But form this solid foundation first before we branch off. Okay, so as I mentioned, I will hang around for lingering questions. I think there were some earlier questions that were more general in nature. If you do have to run, feel free to do that, and thank you so much for coming. But if you want to stay, stay. I'm going to lower my stool. If there's additional questions you want to type into the chat function right now, go for it. For anyone who wore a Liquidrum shirt, thank you. Ryan, I see you. I wore mine too. Okay. It's a beautiful day, by the way, in Waco. Hopefully it's beautiful where you are too. Okay. Okay, let's pick up where we left off. Okay, so this goes back to maybe more of a general question from Andres. In your experience, what is a good way to implement accessory percussion into your high school or middle school percussion curriculum? Honestly, it's no different, in my opinion, than the approach that would be needed to implement it into a college curriculum. I think, and I am a college teacher, and I wrote a book about this stuff, and I don't always do a good job of working it into the curriculum because we spend so much time obsessing about the other, what we refer to as sort of the main food groups. And so you kind of have to do it by force, in my opinion. I mean, you have to carve out you have to carve out weeks of the curriculum to dedicate. If we continue to see it as a kind of a side area, a side issue, a thing to deal with only when you've given a student a tambourine part and they're clearly having trouble with it, and oh, okay, now we'll go teach a tambourine, then it will remain on the periphery of our percussion study. So it has to be prioritized, and that's hard to do because we have limited time. But it just needs to be embedded in the curriculum. I try to capture it as best I can, either in studio class settings or in private lessons when students are specifically more oriented towards concert setting playing. So, for example, those that are clearly heading more in the direction of drum set playing, I don't force them to go through a semester of tambourine and triangle playing. If they are a generalist or someone who is clearly focusing on more orchestral percussion studies, then obviously we do. But I don't do a great job at it. I do need to do better, and it's for all the reasons that I listed above. So we just have to make it more of a priority. Okay, Brian, for shake rolls, do we exercise the wrist to grow its strength and then add some arm jingle, or are the best shake rolls really just good wrists at work without any jingle arms? Good question. So that exercise that I did down the side of the body, we go from big motion to small motion, which is true of any exercise like this. And so initially, I am rotating the entire forearm. That becomes minimized as we go through it. Here, I'll raise my arm so you can see it. And the motion shrinks, and the rotation shrinks, and more of the energy then is put down at the wrist level. But I do like to think of it as being a combination, and I do like to then put it into that context of big to small to big, slow to fast to slow, so that I'm fully exercising all of those things. Michael, thank you. Joe, thank you. Emilio, oh yeah, you had, I think you had to leave, and he wrote me a question on email, and then I think he left and I didn't answer it, so sorry. His question, though, I think was addressing from soft to loud rolls, or maybe from loud to, how we transition, which is one of those things that, maybe will be in that final masterclass of things that I didn't cover. Real quickly, I won't go through much of this, but if we're going from something, so Carnival Overture has this moment, if you want to reference, orchestral playing, but if we're going from a really soft roll into something that's really, really loud, essentially trying to do a long crescendo that we don't think we can accomplish through a friction roll, through a thumb or finger roll. Perhaps it's too long, or it needs to get louder than what a friction roll can achieve. I do start a little bit lower, and I do start with this sort of my striking hand on the edge of the tambourine, creating the beginnings of a shake through repeated motion against the head. So I'm holding the tambourine stable in a vertical position. My fingers stay on the head. They don't release off, because then if I would be striking the head. They stay on. I create a little bit of resistance in my holding hand. And basically all I'm doing here is I'm defining an axis on the head around which I am shaking. It's a shake roll, yeah? But I'm shaking it in a different way, not from the wrist motion that I use in my loud shake rolls. So I start here, and then at some point you have to transition into your true shake roll, right? I sometimes use hybrid rolls as well, which again we didn't get into, but essentially your shake roll is defining this as the axis and shaking around it, and we can do sort of this fishtail roll itself, which defines a vertical axis. So we have kind of both of those happening at the same time. It's a more washy sound. It's less gritty. It's less rhythmic. So when I do this soft to loud thing, I tend to morph into that so that I'm sort of capturing this double axis thing that's happening. So starting here, and to exercise it, I just do back and forth like that. Start soft, try to catch coming up and coming down, back and forth, over and over and over. So that was Emilio's question, which I didn't answer for him, but I don't know, maybe it's beneficial for other people. Let's see, Mackenzie's, have you played Casey Kengelis's Cool Gadget for Tambourine? No, I haven't. I have a student working on that though right now. And Casey has a lot of great stuff. Ryan, thank you. Eric, what should you listen for when doing a shake roll? Evenness of rhythm. Evenness of rhythm. It's what I listen for, honestly, whenever I'm doing any roll. The end effect, obviously, is intended to be sustain, yeah? But that sustain comes from delivering a very rhythmic, even rhythmic layout. So that's the framework. The sustain comes from shrinking the space in between notes and comes from the residual sound of the jingles clashing together. I'll compare this to working on timpani rolls. A lot of people will do towel exercises where they completely mute the head out and practice their timpani rolls on a toweled timpani head, where it's all about the evenness of the delivery of the stroke. When you remove the towel, the vibration of the head, of course, carries over and creates the sustain. But it's only going to be a perfectly manipulated roll if you define that even rhythm to begin with. So especially with the shake roll, which is it's a highly rhythmic roll, listen for the rhythm. Get even rhythm first and let the jingles account for that sustain. Okay. Yeah, so Ethan, I think you asked this question earlier. Thanks for asking it again. Some ways to perform grace notes at loud dynamics. Yeah, two hand, one hand, hand to knee. There's actually a bunch of different options. If it's a flam effect, I use toe heel. Sorry if I blew out the microphone there. Right? That toe heel toe motion is also a good advanced technique for doing some rhythmic stuff. That's just a great thing to generally practice. Dan da dan da dan da dan da dan. But that can account for some of those grace note moments. You can accomplish the same thing between hand and knee if we were playing a flam passage. If you were playing something that's more draggy in nature, segada, segada. Hand, knee, hand in quick succession. If you're playing a 4-note drag, we can end down on the knee. We can also go to that two-hand approach, the belly approach that you guys loved so much. And obviously down here you can do anything, right? So those are my main go-tos, and I would explore. I categorize stuff, so I think of things in categories. So I would explore all of those, which is what I just tracked through, right? How do I do things one hand alone? How do I do things hand to knee between those two implements? And how do I do things with two hands? And explore every option within that. Thanks, Ethan. That's a good question. Juan, thank you. Mackenzie, do you have any sketches that you usually do before, after, or stretch? Yeah. You know, I draw sometimes before I play tambourine. Do you have any stretches that you usually do before after getting into tambourine? I do the same stretches before and after I get into any percussion playing, and that's just it's basic wrist stretching, or forearm stretching rather. I have had some bouts with tendonitis. I do have a wrist injury right now in my left hand, so it's really, really important for me to do this. It's just like, I mean, it is exercise. When we play, we exercise. It's a highly physical thing that we do, even when we're doing relatively small motions, like tambourine playing. So yeah, any basic wrist and forearm stretches are good, and you know, all the same basic approach of have a nice 5, 6, 7 minute warm up of medium stroke approach exercises that just get the blood flowing and get things warm, then fold into a stretch, then fold in to actual practicing. And then when you're all done with everything, stretch it out again. Okay. As your shake rolls develop, do you still focus on a meter for the shake roll in context, like in Carnival Overture? Yes and no, meaning you can. I love to meter my rolls, so if I'm comparing it to snare drum playing, I have a rhythmic grid and a rhythmic skeleton under every single roll that I play, and I absolutely know what it is, and it doesn't change. I explore other options so that if I'm doing some, if I prepare a passage that's a long roll in the orchestra and I have it schemed out where I'm doing fives and I end perfectly here, and then the conductor in the moment does a little bit longer with the ritardando, I have to be flexible, so I have to know how to change that in the moment. But I absolutely scheme things out. And if we're talking about something like Carnival, if you're playing it in an audition setting, yeah, you should know. So count strokes. Di-da, da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, di-da, di-da. I don't know if it becomes a 5, something like that. Go through and sort of methodically break that down. If you want to do that for a while and then forget about it later because you don't want to think rhythmically when you're playing it, that's fine. But at least sort of train yourself that, okay, in this space, I'm going to use this many notes. If you go back to snare drum again, if you think about, I don't know, Scheherazade or Capriccio Espagnol or something, you are absolutely going to put a rhythmic grid under those rolls. You're not just going to guess at it. I don't know, whatever. You're going to really, really train yourself a certain way. At some point, you probably stop being, overly aware of it, but train it initially. I think that's a good approach. Okay. Brian, many thanks. I might actually start practicing this instrument now. Well, that's great. Hey, if nothing else came out of this, if you go practice the tambourine, I'm so happy. Okay, Ryan, thank you. Thanks for masterclass. Looking forward to next week. Thank you, tambourine lesson. And I think Michaela asked earlier on, I don't know if Michaela is still here. Oh yeah, I think I still see your picture. It was kind of similar to that other general question, maybe about how to embed it into something. Michaela, do you remember? Oh, there it is. Yeah. How do you incorporate accessory study into percussion studio instruction? Are the topics covered frequently in masterclass, studio class? Yeah, so I kind of answered that. I think, it's all the same thing, guys. Whether you're a teacher and you're trying to figure out how to get your students more involved in this type of playing, or you're a student and you're trying to get yourself to do more of this thing or that thing, and it doesn't matter whether it's tambourine playing, triangle playing, or drum set or whatever, or, you want to learn how to play congos or whatever. We all have to, you have to set up, for me at least, you have to set up structures that allow you to do that. So if I go into a semester and I think just sort of vaguely and broadly, it might be nice at some point if I teach the tambourine during a studio class. Well, at best, yeah, maybe one studio class is going to be dedicated to tambourine. But probably what's going to happen is that studio class is going to be absorbed by something else and we're not going to get to it. The only way that would happen is if I go into a semester and I say, the studio has to learn how to play tambourine this semester, and here's the 6-week course that we're going to walk through in order to achieve that. So whether that's me as the teacher doing that, or someone in their student years saying, I really need to learn how to do this. This is going to be important for me. Not just because somebody told me it was going to be important or should be important, or maybe I'll need the skill down the road, but because the type of stuff that I want to do, I need to be a good tambourine player. I need to be a good triangle player. When I play with the wind ensemble, when I play with the orchestra, I want to know what I'm doing. I don't want to be guessing. And you set up a course of study for that, right? So, it's I don't know. We ask this question all the time, and I still ask myself this question, and we scratch our heads, honestly, Michaela, and I still scratch my head. Like, how can I get this to happen more? Maybe if I write a book, that would help. Still facing all the same challenges. So prioritize. Flip the script, do something that if you think about your week's worth of practice, subtract a marimba day, subtract a snare drum day, and place in a tambourine and a triangle day. See how that feels and go from there. And as a teacher, Same thing. And I know we're handcuffed a lot of times to like, no, my drum line's working on this, or my front ensemble is doing this, or concert season we've got this competition coming up. Guess what? Especially during concert season, the stuff that the audience hears is the tambourine playing and the triangle playing and the cymbal playing and the bass drum playing, right? I mean, that's big cymbal crash at the climax. I mean, that's what people hear. So if we don't put emphasis into it, that's going to be a big letdown. These things are important. It doesn't matter what level, middle school, high school, college, and professional. Okay. Any other questions? We could all. I mean, I could sit here and stare at you for a while longer. Yeah, that'd be fun. Any other things? Great class, great discussion. Thanks, Michaela. Thanks, Taylor. Thanks from Scotland. Yeah. So if nothing else has popped up, then we'll close this down. Like I said, next Friday we will come back with some triangle playing and triangle approach. Whether you have a triangle or not, feel free to join. Hopefully you'll get some stuff out of that. And as I emailed to all of you guys, I will leave that if you're interested. I'm not forcing anybody to do anything, but if you're interested in getting the digital download version of the book, I'll leave that promo code, that promo going. Well, through the whole next week, since I'm covering triangle anyway. We'll use the book next week as well. So if you want to grab that for $10, you can. That link is in that email, or you can just use promo code Studio Class for the digital download, but don't feel obligated. And yeah, hope you guys are well. Hope you guys are well. Okay. Thanks, friends. Have a great day. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe. Wash your hands. We'll talk to you later.